Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Laura Riley, coordinator of Chicago Wilderness Alliance, and I'd like to welcome you all here for the Chicago Wilderness Cafe. We're going to give it a few more minutes to let folks join us, but then I will turn it over to John Haugland, and he will start with the presentation on the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative Action Plan number 4. I guess with that, I'll turn it over to you, John. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Laura. My name is John Haugland, and I work in the front office at the Great Lakes National Program Office at USEPA here in Chicago. And I really appreciate the time today, being able to speak to you on this Chicago Wilderness Cafe about the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and our work on an action plan. And what I'd like to do is kick off my segment here by playing.
Hear it when I'm playing it.
Yeah, it's just music in the background of the video. So for some reason we're having trouble with the sound, but so anyway, what is the GLRI? We're going to go over this in the presentation here. What is the GLRI, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative? What is the GLRI action plan? What are ways to provide input to the new action plan that we're just starting work on? And with remaining time to hear your ideas and suggestions or any questions. So what is the GLRI? The GLRI was established in 2010, and in 2010 it was first funded, and it was meant to accelerate protection and the restoration of the Great Lakes ecosystem. It's a partnership. It's run by a partnership of 16 federal agencies, with EPA as the lead convener. And we also involve state governments, tribal and local governments, and academia as well in guiding this effort. A lot of that money is it comes through EPA and then is spread out through other federal agencies, through grants to the other organizations, and in terms of contracts work as well. So between 2010 when it started and 2023, adding it all up, Congress has funded over $3 billion to the GLRI. It's had strong bipartisan support. And this is really significant funding. It's augmented efforts that have been going on all along, but with this money, we've done things like we've remediated over 6 million cubic yards of contaminated sediments up to this point in Great Lakes harbors. We've prevented and controlled invasive species in the basin. We're restoring coastal habitat and supporting native species. We're supporting demonstration farms and green infrastructure projects to attack nutrient loadings. All right, so that's the GLRI in a nutshell. What is the GLRI action plan? Every 5 years, EPA works with all the federal partners, the states, the tribal governments, and public get input as well to develop and update a 5-year action plan. This action plan guides how we invest the money that we get from Congress to do the protecting and restoring of the Great Lakes. The plan lays out long-term goals, objectives, commitments, and measures, and targets for all of our priorities. And you can see that plan at glri.us, which is in the chat. That's our main website. And there's all sorts of information that you can get there about the projects we funded, the partners we have, all the foundational documents such as past action plans and our current one. So right now we're working on priorities that are laid out in Action Plan 3, what's up on the screen, that cover. And that takes us through September 2024. So this means a new action plan is needed and we need to start working on it now. So right now over the summer, we're getting input on what people think the Action Plan 4 should look like. And that will start guiding our work in 2024. Okay. Yeah, that's basically it on the Action Plan 4. Beginning to gather our ideas now. The action plans have always been organized, and as a matter of fact, I think it might be in our appropriations language, organized under 5 focus areas. And I'm not going to go into the title of each focus area, but on this slide, you can see the main topics that are covered under each focus area. So focus area 1 looks at Great Lakes areas of concern, those contaminated harbors that I mentioned earlier. And then contaminants in the Great Lakes that might be of concern, for example, to those people who fish, hunt, and gather in the Great Lakes Basin. Focus area 2 is about preventing and controlling invasive species. Focus area 3 is about stormwater runoff from agriculture, as well as urban stormwater runoff and efforts to minimize those. Focus area 4 is about creating resilient habitats, native habitats, and sustaining native species. And focus area 5, I think it's called Foundations of Future GLRI Efforts, something along those lines, which has a science component and then an education component. I'm going to really quickly go through these in just a second, but in terms of looking forward to Action Plan 4, there are a couple higher priority themes now that we need to be articulating in the next action plan. And those are 1, climate resiliency, and 2, diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental justice, and engaging our underserved communities, as well as increasing accessibility. I keep reaching my finger over to the escape, which would put us out of the slide presentation instead of tab to move forward. There we go. Okay, so focus area 1 has the Great Lakes areas of concern, cleaning up some of the most contaminated rivers and harbors in the Great Lakes. And to give you an idea about the GLRI, from 1987, when the areas of concern were identified in our water quality agreement with Canada, until 2010, we were able to delist 1 area of concern. And that basically means we were able to have cleaned it up, monitored to make sure it's okay, and we no longer call it an area of concern. Over that time period, we delisted 1. From 2010 till today, we've delisted 5. And so you can see it's sped up pretty dramatically. And then what we're aiming to do on areas of concern is to complete all the work remaining for delisting to occur by 2030. So that's really ambitious, because I think that means like 18, 19 more areas of concern over the next 7 years. And our action plan will help guide those activities. The other part of focus area 1 are contaminants. And that has included activity that means sharing information about contaminants of concern to those who fish, hunt, harvest, or otherwise use the Great Lakes. Information such as fish advisories, for example, and how people can lower their risks. Focus area 2, invasive species, has a prevention component, work to prevent unwanted introductions of invasive species, such as the invasive carp that you see jumping here in the Mississippi basin. And it also includes controlling invasive species that are already in the Great Lakes. That's a picture of Phragmites, you might recognize that. But aquatic species as well, such as sea lamprey, hydrilla, invasive crayfish, quagga mussels. Focus area 3 is about nutrients. The first item is agricultural runoff. It's about tackling the nutrients like phosphorus, which comes from agricultural runoff and can cause harmful algal blooms in the lakes. Many of you have probably seen stories in particular from Lake Erie, where that's a problem that threatens drinking water, for example. The nutrients focus area also includes stormwater runoff from developed areas. And it's about controlling stormwater runoff through practices that some of you might know about, such as green infrastructure, swales, rain gardens, green roofs, and a whole host of other things. Focus area 4 is about habitats and species, resilient habitats, about protecting native habitats, in particular coastal wetlands that provide spawning habitat for fish and protection against wave action. It also includes sustaining native species, native bird, fish, and plants species. Love this picture of the osprey. And then focus area 5, future foundations for Great Lakes work, includes education, efforts to help educate current and future generations about the Great Lakes ecosystem. And last but not least, the science. We conduct science that's necessary to improve our knowledge of the Great Lakes. We do quite a bit of monitoring over the long term about Great Lakes water quality. So that's just a quick run through of these focus areas and these topics. And I can go back to any of them and talk a little bit more about any of them in particular if you have questions. But what I'd like to turn to now is that we have opportunities now as we start to plan for action plan 4. We have opportunities to hear from you, to get your ideas, your suggestions on what the next action plan should include, should look like within the context of those 5 focus areas. So first of all is that that web email address, glriactionplan4@epa.gov, which is also in the chat, I believe. If you have any ideas anytime, you can send them to that address, and it comes to me and a couple other people who I work with, a couple other colleagues, and we incorporate those ideas into what is considered by our management. So you can provide those ideas and suggestions by email. We also have a number of public engagement sessions. We've done 3 already, Cleveland in June, Superior, Wisconsin last week, and Rochester, New York last night. We have 2 more public engagement sessions scheduled. One is in Milwaukee on July 25th, so that's next week. One is in Detroit on August 15th, yeah. And then we have a second virtual one. We had a virtual one at the end of June, We'll have a second virtual public engagement session on August 25th. And all of those future engagement opportunities are, the locations of them and the timing of them are all posted at https://glri.us/action-plan. Gotta kind of have these bullets out of order. The last point I want to make is that sometime in the winter, December, January timeframe, we will have a draft plan that we will share with the public and ask for public comments more officially on that actual draft that we'll share. Did I want to cover anything else? Nope. So that's it for me for presenting. Let me open it up to questions, suggestions, ideas that you want to share in the time we have remaining. Well, I encourage you to think about it. Take a look at the action plan 3. And if something doesn't make sense, or if you think we're missing something, please send an email to that GLRI action plan 4@epa.gov, and we'll pull that comment into our consideration.
I dropped into the chat the registration for the virtual session on August
Excellent.
3rd, and some information just on the dates on the Milwaukee and the Detroit, if anyone's further north. But I appreciate your time today, John, and I'm excited to hear about your expansion into climate resiliency and equitable access and the principles that you're approaching. So.
Yeah, we're excited about that too. The resiliency issue, or I'll say the climate issue, has been problematic in the past for us, but we have a real big green light, to say the least. We have to incorporate that, and we've been thinking about it all along. We've been, our designs for habitat restoration and our designs for contaminated sediment cleanup have to take into account future climate conditions, wave actions, drought, heat. And so I anticipate, if you look at action plan 3, you won't see it very obviously, but if you look at the objectives and the commitments and the measures in action plan 3, you can imagine how right now we're considering how to adjust those in all the focused areas to take better, more overt account of climate trends and how to think about things in terms of resiliency in the face of those trends. Inclusion is something that we think can be accomplished also across all the focus areas. And in some cases, we're not quite sure how, but I know we really want, part of inclusion is the accessibility of the projects that we're, when we've cleaned up places, when we've restored habitats, is it accessible to the communities that are adjacent to it? And then also, how can we engage communities as we do planning for these projects, as to get their input on what's important. Some of our projects are like, we want to reduce runoff to the Great Lakes for reasons about harmful algal blooms, but reducing runoff projects can also reduce flooding, which is very important to a lot of underserved communities. So we are growing in our awareness of places where we need to engage with the communities.
Yeah. We have about 3 minutes left. If anybody has a question, please unmute yourself and just ask the question or throw it into the chat, and I'd be happy to read it out.
Hi, yeah, I had one question. Hi, I'm Maggie, work for Resource Environmental Solutions. You mentioned the goal of cleaning up all of the areas of concern by 2030.
Yeah.
And I'm relatively new to this space, so I wanted to ask, is there any, like, are the regulations that exist now preventing from any area, like new areas of concern developing, or is there a risk of, you know, that list growing during this time?
There are regulations in place. Yeah, the cleanups of the messes that we're cleaning up are historical messes, sometimes dating back into the 1800s, where industry effluents were not regulated. They are regulated now, and so the chance of anything getting as bad as an area of concern now, and so a new area of concern being identified, are very slim because of our Clean Water Act, our Clean Air Act, our Superfund, and other statutory authorities where we do have regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I hope it gave people enough motivation to go look at our website and the action plan and consider some thoughts to send to us.
Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to use the email that we dropped into the chat to connect with John directly. So
yeah.
And with that, we will have this posted on the website. Everybody have a great day. And we'll look forward to our next cafe, which will be August 24th. And I dropped information on that from the chat. It's on landowners and land trust public information session. Sorry, I should have had that queued up, ready to go. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you.